So just as we were able to shift over a different topic last one, this one is called Love is Not Judgment. Everybody wants to talk about that?
What are the choices?
That's fine. It's a rhetorical question. Love is holding space for imperfection.
What kind of love are you going to talk about?
I'll talk about it, then you'll tell me if it's agreeable. What should I say? That's my talk.
No, what kind of love?
That's what I'm going to talk about. What kind of love?
Like children, parents.
Okay. Love is holding space for imperfection. If you see, that's the subtitle. Okay. Another way of putting it is love is celebrating vulnerability. I want to talk about two primary models for love. One, which is the predominant model that we find today in the secular Western world, and compare that to a Torah model. Now, I already alluded to this topic in some of the previous sessions, especially the concept of love as transcendence. But I'm going to talk about it more specifically and more detailed now, as far as our relationships go. Now, the fact is, every human being needs love and needs to give love. You know, love is like water. It nourishes. A flower without water is going to wither. A soul without water is going to also wither. So we all need love. And as we'll discuss, we also need to give love. And there's all forms of love. This is whether it's romantic love between spouses, whether it's love between siblings, parents to children, children to parents, siblings to each other, and friends to each other. They're just different forms, and all of them go into the category called love. So, I once gave a class in a thing called the Learning Annex in Manhattan, New York. And here was the question that I posed. The topic there was, is there such a thing as love forever after? Is there such a thing as love forever after? Which means, like, you know, the belief that love forever. And there was around 50 people in the room, around 25 men, 25 women. Some were couples, you could see. And I asked the question, do you believe in love forever after? Like loving one person the rest of your life. And out of the 50 people, only one young woman raised her hand that she believes. The rest did not. So I was a little surprised. Not that I was surprised they don't believe it. I was surprised that they acknowledged that they didn't believe it. Especially they were sitting with their spouse or with their couple. So imagine you're sitting with your husband or wife, or your boyfriend or girlfriend, and you ask if love forever after, and you say no, I don't believe it. So it was a little weird, but strange. But then I asked them why. So one person said it very clearly: nothing in life lasts forever. Not the food you eat, not the money you make, not your looks, not your youth. Everything deteriorates, ages, erodes, and dies. So why suddenly, when it comes to love, is there forever after? It's eternal. Why would there be such a thing as eternal love? Nothing is eternal. And the other people nodded their heads. Everybody agreed with it. Okay. And I said, yeah, I think you're right. However, why do you explain this young woman who believes in it? So they said, we all were once at that stage when we were idealistic. And she probably never was really disappointed in a relationship. So she still believes it's possible. You know, but the fact is, it's the stuff of dreams, the stuff of books, novels, movies. Not realistic. So I went on to present what I'm going to present now, that in general speaking, there's two models, as I said, two models. We'll start with the scientific. I mean, there's more than two, but two general ones. There's one. The one I'm going to speak about is the most common, the most prevalent model in psychology and in biology. And it's actually called the biological model. And I just coined it as being like the Freudian, Darwinian model for love. Okay? And that is the following. That love is a necessary component in the cardinal rule of all evolution, of all existence, is survival of the species. The species must survive. That controls everything. If the species doesn't survive, it dies. So the species all compete for resources, and they need to breed. And you look at all the stories and all the films and the nature shows and the books, they'll all explain how animals and even plants all court the mate, whether through flamboyant presentations of colors, or those macho battles between lions or rhinoceros or hippos to be the stud in the harem, how they all compete and they all fight to be the one that breeds. With the females looking for a mate that will produce the best offspring, and the males looking for a female that will be the most fertile. This is like the rule of evolution. It's so common to see it all the time. And everything evolves around that. So the question is, what is love? How does love play a role in that? So the answer is, love is just a trick of nature to get two male and female to mate. There's nothing in it on its own. It's to get them to mate, so they have to have some attraction to each other, or else they won't be drawn to each other. So they need to have that type of connection. But here's how it goes. What about human love? So some argue, and I'm going to quote specifically the philosopher Schopenhauer, who I mentioned, I believe. Some argue that love is an illusion. And it's actually, I even seen written that some see it as a mutation, as a mistake of nature, where we've evolved too much and we've created the illusion of romance. Because it's just a waste of money and a waste of time, a waste of energy. You don't, for example, see a lion coming to a lioness and say, "You want a drink?" You know? Or let's go out to dinner. Or let's go to a film movie. Or let's court each other for next 7 months or 20 months or whatever it is. And we'll go out to nice places and museums and stuff like that, you know? All in order to get the two to mate. Because nature is very efficient. The fact that humans do this is a lot of waste of time. I'm telling you, that's how it's looked. I know it sounds funny, but that's it. Schopenhauer puts it this way. He says, love is the delusion created by nature to make people think that the only way to really connect with each other because we love each other. But in truth, it's just like two bacteria mating, and stop making it so fat. Don't make it so sentimental. And therefore, when there's a breakdown of relationship, don't cry over it and get over it. All this that we aspire to find someone we love, we call it a soulmate, and to the romance of it, and the courtship, and the heartbreak when it doesn't work out. All this, according to this thinking, is a bunch of waste of time, a bunch of nonsense. Can you imagine? The things that drive trillions and trillions of dollars of therapy, and books, and music, and all out there is just a waste of time. Just behave like you should, like two bacteria mating, and that's it. Stop making a whole fuss about it. I know I'm not trying to make it funny, but this is you're not going to hear it stated this way because it's not nobody likes to hear it this way. It's not very romantic. You don't want to date someone who's going to tell you this and say, let's stop with all this courtship and let's just do what we have to do, have a child and go on. Especially today, actually it's gone twisted the other way around. That people have sexual relations and they don't even want a child. It's just the pleasure itself. And that's completely opposite of what nature wants. The whole point of nature was survival of the species. But we're not going to go into that. That's another discussion. And I challenge you can go look it up, you can Google it, you can research it. That's the prevalent model. Now, why did I call it Darwinian Freudian? Because think of Darwin, the survival of the species. The species will do whatever it takes to survive. And that's what's necessary. And Freud added the psychological element that the driving force in human beings is not care and love and concern and empathy. It's sexual drive, the id, the pleasure principle, whatever you want to call it. That's the core of a person. And obviously he probably judged everybody like he's by himself and his Jewish mother. So I'm going to now contrast that with another model called the Torah Model. You read the Bible, the Genesis, right in the beginning, in just a few verses, you have one of the most powerful and eloquent theories on love. What does it say? God created the human being, male and female, as one androgynous creature. Then he separated them into two, and from then on, they look and seek out each other to reconnect to the divine image in which they were originally created, so they should be one again. It doesn't even mention at that point children or offspring. Afterwards it says, when they come together, I bless you, God says, that you together shall bring children to the world. So really, it actually turns over the whole theory. Most people think the Orthodox or the religious version is you marry and love is only to have children. I would argue the exact opposite. The evolutionary theory says it's only to have children because that's the whole purpose of it, is the perpetuation of the species. From a Torah point of view, the mere fact that two souls meet is the most beautiful transcendent experience because they're connecting in a unifying fusion, which is connecting to their own second half of their divine image, the concept of soulmate. You tell me which is the more romantic version. If someone courted you and they presented the first one or the second one, which one would you prefer? So I'm not here to vote on the matter. I'm just presenting them. I have no question that the second one is something that resonates with us. It does not resonate with a person that the love I have for my spouse, the love I have for my children, is all some trick of nature to get me to care for them, so I provide for them. And that there's nothing in that love. And that when we die, the love dies with us. When you hear the stories, story after story, people giving their lives for their loved ones. You hear the famous story of a woman who unfortunately got Alzheimer's. She's in the hospital to the point she doesn't recognize her children anymore. And she finally loses recognition of her husband. And they loved each other for over 60 years. And he comes every day to see her. And the nurse says, you know what? She doesn't recognize you. There's no point of you coming. She doesn't even know that you're here. What's the point of you coming? She doesn't recognize you. And he answers without hesitation, but I recognize her. To dismiss all that and say, this is a trick of nature to just get them to mate, it doesn't resonate with us, and it doesn't even sound right. Something's wrong with it. Again, I don't know if that's a scientific argument. I'm not here to make scientific arguments. I'm just pointing it out. There's love, even for people who have difficulties with it, and who perhaps have challenges in their relationship, but at least somewhere in our hearts, we always hold out the idea that love is one of the most noble and most transcendent and most, I would say, most maybe awesome experiences that a human being can have. That love is the ability to get out of yourself and care for another person in a really powerful way. It's really the only antidote to arrogance and ego and self-interest. So it's like actually a healing factor that heals us from just being self-absorbed. That's why you find, for example, in the Torah, the Talmud, in Jewish law, you know that the people in the Supreme Court, the Jewish Supreme Court, the Sanhedrin, had to be married. They could not be single. Even if they were great scholars and they studied Torah all day, because there's something missing. They don't have the transcendent dimension that love adds. Even if they're great tzaddikim. Not to compare. Christianity, celibacy is considered to be the optimal. Whether they keep it or not is another story. But and in Judaism, celibacy is actually a sin. You could say, 1 second, a person wants to study Torah all day, wants to sit and meditate about God all day. No, that's not what God wants. He wants you to experience God through another human being and to care for another. Just to, maybe it's not really an aside, but it's something I want to just point out, something fascinating. I was having I don't know if a debate is the right word, but I was having a discussion with a scholar, so to speak, and he's telling me, I give you that the Jews have a lot of great scholars, but we also have great scholars, meaning the secular world, and great giants of all natures. So I said, okay, tell me, who's the greatest philosopher in the Western world? Aristotle, most of them. Who's the greatest English writer? Shakespeare. The greatest artist? Okay, so there you could have different debates, whether it's Rembrandt or Da Vinci or this one or that one. Musician, there's Mozart and Beethoven and Bach. I said, okay, beautiful, great people, they left us unbelievable legacies. Let me ask you this question. If they were such great people, can you tell me, did Aristotle have children? That's a good question, I got to Google it. I said, and let me find out if he has grandchildren, even if he had children. And does he have a family that can say we are grandchildren of Aristotle, who passed on to us a tremendous legacy? And for that matter, why don't you find out about Shakespeare too, and Julius Caesar, and Alexander the Great, et and what else did I mention? Etc., etc. I said, you, a scholar, don't even know. You have to look it up, right? Because it's not that significant. Okay. The man called Abraham, perhaps the pioneer of all pioneers. He was a philosopher greater than any of them, because he was the first, and brought monotheism to the world. What is the greatest compliment given to him in the Bible? Not his brilliance and not his intelligence. You know what it is? It's when God says, this is an unbelievable little episode most people are not so aware of. And that is, God's about to destroy the wicked city of Sodom and Gomorrah. The Bible tells us. And God says, should I tell Abraham my plans? We read this, that God is talking to himself. And then he says, but how could I hide my plan from a man? These are his words. A man who committed his life to pass on justice and virtue to his children and to his family for generations to come. How could I conceal my plan from such a man? Now, is that Abraham's? You could say Abraham was a tremendous philosopher. He was a tremendous man of virtue. He brought justice and virtue. Everything we worship today, this country, the principles of Bill of Rights, civil rights, virtue, justice, this comes from Abraham. He's the first man that brought charity to the world. Yet God says, but he's going to commit, he has children, and a legacy is going to pass on for generations. And that's the story. All these people were great giants, but you know what? They didn't have time to diaper their children. Aristotle would say, I'm busy bringing tremendous philosophy to the world. Rousseau said that. Rousseau, the famous Enlightenment philosopher, considered from the more refined ones, brought his children to the city square and said, I'm busy philosophizing. Let others take care of my children. You don't have no time. I'm God's gift to the world. I have no time for children, for nagging children, for a nervous wife, etc., etc. In Judaism, no. Love is the greatest thing. You believe in virtue and justice. You're a great philosopher. Let me see. Do you love your wife and your husband? Do you love your children? Do you take care of them? Do you spend Friday night at the table with them, or you're busy composing music or writing books or philosophizing? Because that's the true test of transcendence. Just to show you here. Bertrand Russell was once asked. He behaved unethically, so the Board of Ethics at Cambridge called him in. He slept with a student or whatever it was. And they said, you're a professor of ethics. How can you behave unethically? You know what his response was? I also teach mathematics, and I'm not a triangle. You know? In other words, what you teach is not who you are necessarily. I can be brilliant at teaching about triangles, doesn't mean I have to be a triangle. I can teach ethics, doesn't mean I have to be ethical. Maimonides writes, who is the true wise person? Not the greatest orator and the most brilliant mind and the greatest analyst, is the man or the person. You see their greatness, you know where? And how they walk, and how they talk, and how they do business, and how they eat and drink and sleep, and how they treat others. Interesting contrast, huh? One, it's all about the brain, and you don't have to be it. The other one is, yes, what you teach is who you are, and who you are is what you teach. That doesn't mean we're perfect human beings. It just means that we have a consistency. Now, I want to bring it back to the two models. So love, from a point of view of the second model, is transcendence, is the greatest thing you can be. It's not about survival of the species. It may bring that as well, fine, great. But it's an end in itself. Two human beings, instead of being selfish, self-contained entities, decide to connect to each other, to defer to the other, to be flexible, to not be judgmental, to be not condescending, to be and accept another entity, because together we become greater than the sum of the parts. Which is why by a chuppah you have a canopy that's above both spouses, both partners. Because it transcends a greater force, a third partner. So in the learning annex I concluded and I said, and therefore, I agree with you. If love was just a human-made, man-made thing, or something that evolution sprung on us as a trick of nature, then I agree it's not forever after. And that's why you see very rarely monogamy in animal kingdom. Because it's about the species. Who really cares whether you're loyal to each other? But if love is transcendence, and love is a way of kissing God, then you bring a divine element, that's where the eternity comes from. The eternity comes not from men. Yes, man-made things are all temporary. But it's a divine dimension that's beyond the sum of the parts, not just about species, it's about two souls connecting to a higher divine image. And I share this. Generally speaking, in love you find three levels of compatibility that most people look for. Physical compatibility, right? Two people are attracted to each other. Sexual attraction, physical attraction. Second is emotional compatibility. You know, you could fall in love with a face in a model in a magazine. It doesn't mean you meet the person and they have any connection. It could be a person who's completely emotionally empty. So you need you need to feel for each other. And then there's intellectual compatibility. Respect of ideas, shared discussions, that type of thing. Now, and I remember said to the same group, I said, so tell me, what do you think about those three? One person raised it. If I had one out of the three, I'd be happy. I said, which one? I said, the physical, that would be good enough for me. You know? 2 out of the 3, that's already like a home run. 3 out of the 3 is fantasy. That's what's... I said, okay. Well, let me add one more. See, these three, as great as them, and they are important. They are important. Because we know that. Yet they're not permanent. You know why? Because physical looks change. So do emotional needs, and so do intellectual interests. The fourth, we'll call it spiritual compatibility. What is that? It's in simple language. It means two people who share a vision that's more than the sum of the parts. It's not just one respects the other's intelligence or connects emotionally or physically. Something greater than both of them. Share values. If you ask the question, what kind of mark you want to make in this world? They'll share and tell you what kind of mark, what kind of home we want to build, what kind of children. What do we want to leave when we're no longer here? Basically a transcendent dimension to the relationship. And that can last forever. The first 3, physical, one day you wake up and your spouse is not as beautiful as they once were. And someone else you met is more beautiful. This happens, unfortunately. Some people emotionally, you get used to the person that you're emotionally connected with. You get stimulated by somebody else. Same thing intellectually. But the fourth is a transcendent thing that doesn't change with age. There are people who are 90 years old, and I met people like this, that have that transcendent connection just like when they were 20. Even though their looks changed, and their emotions changed, and their intellect changed. And when they have the fourth, then obviously it infuses the first 3, that they see the beauty where they need to see it. So I'm not saying the fourth without the 3, but the 3 plus the fourth. And I saw it around the room. I saw them all, like someone nodding, they all immediately related. Except they didn't hear these language before, never heard these words. And we're not taught in school to think that way. Most of us, where do we learn about love? Unfortunately, we learn about it from our parents. Maybe it's fortunate for some. But we learn it from human beings, and for good or for bad. Then we may read about something, then we learn from experience, then we learn from Hollywood, and from all other places. I mean, you don't have really good modeling, frankly. If you're lucky, you may have had parents and grandparents that were the healthy sort, but you have to be lucky. If not, and even with that, there are plenty of other counter images, Just look at any television show. Tell me, where's the sanctity, the eternity, the commitment in relationships? You tell me a television show where you see that? It's not even a consideration. Everybody's with everybody. There's no factors beyond that. So it's an uphill battle because we're not taught. But once you hear it, it resonates completely. Everybody says, of course, transcendent love. Of course, who wouldn't want to have transcendent love? You have to be crazy not to want it. But as I said much earlier, some of these times we hear about this already halfway through our lives. But it doesn't matter. Wherever you hear it, you can do something with it. And when you have that dimension, everything changes. I see here the title is Love is Not Judgment. I understand why that title, because love, everybody considers love as being something, you know what? I mean, how many people get annoyed by stupid things in a relationship? She chews too loudly, I kid you not. Now, we all understand it doesn't begin and end with that. It's usually more other things than that becomes annoying. Or how many people talk about he squeezes the toothpaste from the middle of the tube, not from the bottom of the tube. This makes me crazy. So, the simple suggestion is the King Solomon version is just get two tubes. Let him squeeze his tube, and you squeeze this. No, but when I see a middle squeeze, I have to fix it, and when I fix it, he goes crazy. Like that. Or the one with time. She's always late. Or the other way, he's always late. I'm not really discriminating. It can be either way. And when you think about it from an outside, you think this is what kind of petty nonsense is this? The relationship is a little more than that. But you see people actually bring this up. Now, we all know there's probably something deeper, as I said. But sometimes it really does come down to, because there is nothing deeper. If at the end of the day, the relationship is built on just a few sporadic connections, what does it stand on? Both people are working, they're hardworking, life takes over, and then in the beginning, after the honeymoon is over, what keeps nourishing a relationship? So of course judgmentalism is going to come in and everything else. If he was only perfect, or if she was only perfect, complete fantasy. Love, or I would say trust, which is an element in love. You need trust in love. Trust is not built on perfection. Trust is built on accountability. Perfection is an illusion of a child who expects, since life wasn't perfect, I want a perfect situation. Accountability, someone makes a mistake and you know that they're not going to cover it up, they're not going to lie. They're going to come and say, I made a mistake. That's how you build trust. So that's why there's the concept of what I said earlier, love is celebrating vulnerability. In one of the chapters in my book, in Torah Meaningful Life, I have a chapter on intimacy. And I call it Celebrating Vulnerability, subtitle. Why? Because most people think of the word vulnerable, they think of it in a very fearful way. I don't want to be vulnerable. Why would I want to be vulnerable? People can take advantage and step on me. But you know something? A healthy, loving relationship is all about vulnerability. It means you really have another person who's not just there to serve your needs or there to just complement some things. They're there for you can be able to be completely comfortable with yourself as you are with no one else is around, and that person will never take advantage of that. Most people hear that, they say, oh, I don't know if I'll ever meet such a person. But that's the standard. Just because some society doesn't yet have that standard doesn't mean we should compromise on that standard. Yeah, thank you. So I submit here that that's why we're here. One of the reasons we talk about these things is because we want to higher our standards, not lower them. And we're coming closer to a day like Shabbat, which is a day of love. It's a day where we look to transcend ourselves and to have an experience that's greater than yourself. And when you have that, yes, you learn to love without judgment. How many people have I heard this from? I'm sure you've seen and heard it yourself. I just a few weeks, I do a program every Sunday night. It's called My Life Chassidus Applied. I answer questions. People write anonymous questions. Nothing's taboo. Everything, right? I should say nothing's off, even taboo topics. Right? So a few weeks ago, I spoke about, what was the topic? The topic was, a guy wrote to me that he's marrying off his daughter, and he doesn't want to invite his father to the wedding because his father was abusive to him. And what should he do? He feels it'll destroy his whole evening because he wants to have a nice, beautiful night. His father's presence is just to him a very difficult question to answer. How do you answer a question like that? You can't reverse it. There's only one time you're going to marry off a child. So how do you... So I spoke about it. I tried to balance it. My answer was at the end of the day, if you come first, and if indeed you cannot forgive your father or at least overlook it, you don't need to invite him just because it's going to be embarrassing, etc., etc. That was my approach, more or less. If it's destructive to you, if you can swallow it, then it's not. That's another story. Anyway, I got a letter a few days later. A guy writes to me, and I could see him. It's a heart-wrenching letter. He writes to me that I listened to your program, I listened to that answer, and I have to tell you, it gave me for the first time the courage, after 17 years of marriage with my wife, to tell her about how much I hate Shabbos. I never told her before, my own wife. Why? My father would be very, very strict. When I'd come home from school, he would always ask me, what did I study? If I didn't have the exact answer, he would hit me, humiliate me, even worse than hitting, berate me. And the worst day of all day was Shabbos, Friday night, because everybody was at the table. He says, I can tell you, I counted down as a child. Every day was like horror. Sunday was closer, one day closer to Shabbos. Monday came Wednesday, Thursday, I literally would throw up. And I knew Friday night is coming that night. And children don't know they have anywhere to run. So they're completely subject to, I was like, I couldn't believe, it's not like the first time I heard such, but a father. So I say to myself, what kind of sick man is this? It's his own child, biological child, should be a natural thing you love. What kind of behavior is that? Like what in the name of what? That the son is not living up to the standards? It's like insanity. Anyway, recently, he wrote to me. He said you can read it, just no names. He didn't give me his name anyway, but no detail. Just a few weeks ago, I got another email from him. I said, that this has evolved. I've written a letter to my father, and he's older now, and he's coming to apologize. He says an opening, not like you can't reverse the damage. The only thing I'm reading, my point is, it just happens. That's why I'm bringing it up. The horrific experiences. There are people who are supposed to love you. It's one thing. It's a stranger. It's a Nazi. It's a someone. But your own parent. That's the worst of all. That's why abuse coming from a close one is nothing close to the abuse coming from a stranger. Because the close one is supposed to love you. And a child, how are they supposed to understand love when the one who loves me and takes me tomorrow, the next day to the ice cream shop, the day before made my life into hell? So I'm not trying to bring up really painful things, but I just wanted to point out how distorted human beings can love suddenly becomes a force of a weapon. And the judgmentalism. I was blessed, thank God. My father was the most non-judgmental person I ever met. And I think I picked it up from him. I don't even have judgment in my body. People can tell me anything. I never pass judgment. And it's natural. I didn't even have to work at it. I think it's just a gift. But people have so much judgment in them. I find it to be more like an insecurity, like a thing. You're not so judging others, so you don't look so bad. But whatever it is, it's not a healthy. No one ever pointed us to be judge. God did not appoint you. You are the judge of the world or the judge of others. But we do it all the time, judgmentalism. And then so often you find we judge people for things that we ourselves are more guilty of than they are. But you know what? When it comes to ourselves, we're blinded. No, I'm not exactly like that. Blah, blah, blah. You start hearing all these things. I hear this very often, siblings. My sister, you know what she did to me? And then then she tells me, I say, you're doing the same thing? No, you can't compare. I'm not trying to compare. My point is we're blinded when it comes to ourselves. So at least acknowledge you have a blind spot. Or I like when people tell me, I say, you have any blind spots? Yes, but I know what they are. I said, then it's not a blind spot. If it's a blind spot, then you don't know, But that's how it is. Or like the doctor that says, I'll tell you when you need a second opinion. The whole point is I need a second opinion outside of you, not when you tell me. You get, this is all the same subjectivity masquerading like objectivity. The point is that when it comes to love and you take the first model, judgmentalism is possible and everything else comes with it. You take transcendence into it. That here's the person in your life that is God sent to you, that both of you can experience something greater than each of you. This is a gift. Where's there room for anything else? Does it mean both are perfect? Absolutely not. And that's exactly the point. You can love something that's not perfect. You see people, you think, "What? I have children, I have grandchildren. They're perfect?" No, I have a nice discretion. I know when they're not, and neither am I. That doesn't mean you can't love. If you can't love someone because they're not perfect, trust me, it has nothing to do with them. It has to do with you. Because you don't know how to love. Love is not based on perfection. Love is a gift. And when you think of it in new ways, which is what we're trying to do here, I think it can open up all kinds of vistas you'd never imagine. In dating, in marriage, in maintaining marriage, and making marriage grow. Because this is a crisis today. We have a crisis of relationships. Marriages, the divorce rate is up there, but that's technical divorce. How many people are divorced even though they're together? Emotionally divorced. They're married for convenience purposes. Because we really have not been taught how to really have emotional intelligence, how to have an understanding that love is not about some type of ideal. Love is really a tree that two people together have planted and grows. And I take that actually from a story I once heard. I also have that included in the book. There was a young woman in Crown Heights in Brooklyn in the early 50s, very accomplished, and she was like, the big catch. Everybody wanted to marry her on all levels, intelligent, beautiful, and all that. And she was she went inside to the Lubavitcher Rebbe for a yechidus, or a private audience. And the Rebbe it was a small community then, so he said, so what's going on with the shidduchim scene? And the Rebbe mentioned some names, because it was, like I said, a small community. So every name, she had another story. She said, this one, too short. This one is, right. This one is too illiterate. This one's this one's that. You get it. And she was accomplished, so it was middle. So the Rebbe suddenly says to he smiled, and he says to you've read too many books, too many romance novels, I think he said, and you watch too many movies. Love is not what they tell you in all these books. Love is not this thing that you fall, love at first sight, and so on. The Rebbe said to this, and I found it to be very, very profound, because we overuse the word love. I love you. And the next 2 years later, they're in divorce court about to murder each other. What happened exactly? Love. So I've said, love is not the thing that they tell you. Love is when two people will like each other and relate to each other and trust each other and make a partnership and build a life. And when they start doing all the little non-dramatic details together, they create a tree called love. That's what love is. Love is the outgrowth of two people who do that. Doesn't start with love. Not that they don't love each other. Of course, there needs to be all the connection. But I found it to be profound because it was a mature definition. It wasn't this obviously we all like to have the fireworks and there's an excitement involved. But that's the initial crush, the initial connection. The key thing, two people together made a commitment and they do details that are not exciting. Little things in life. And then what happens? You plant the seed, and then a tree, and that's the love. Think about that. That means it's a process, and it's a result of our commitment to the process. It's not just something that happens. So, what can I do? I didn't fall in love. What could I do? I didn't meet the one. It's true, we have to work on finding the right person, and I'm sure there's many things we can do. But it's much more than just what can I do. There's plenty you can do. There's knowing what to focus on, knowing what to not focus on. Sometimes we need guidance, and sometimes if we didn't have good role modeling, we definitely need guidance. It's good to meet a good old grandmother somewhere, or aunt, someone that can give a little taste of what a relationship is like. And unfortunately, there's a lot of bad relationships out there, but they don't have to be. People's priorities are off and off. Now, this is not so much a discussion of how to build a relationship. I just wanted to give an overview of, not bad, of what it's like, what the different models are. But ultimately, the most powerful model, the transcendent model that I've been describing and discussing. But since we have some time, I thought it would be good to leave some time to hammer this out even further through interaction, rather than me just rolling on with a monologue here. But I will say in a concluding note is that each one of us, no matter where we are in our lives, whether you're young and not yet began building a relationship, or we're already somewhat a middle, or we're on the more senior side of things, every one of us can bring better love into our personal lives, into our extended lives, our families and communities. And it's essentially another way of what we call revealing the divine in this world. It's another word for the divine, because this is a selfish materialistic world, and love counters the selfishness by bringing transcendence and soulfulness into it. It's really what it comes down to. So really, you can equate love with spirituality and spirit and soul, because love is not a material experience. That is why love, intimacy, sexuality, and all it brings is so mysterious, because it's not of this world. It's not just another thing you buy on the shelf and you analyze. Nobody can master love. Nobody can master sexuality. These things always remain elusive because they're really not of this world. So the way to embrace it is to, in a way, I don't say the word surrender, but to like stand in awe of it and accept it as a gift given to us. Because imagine a life we would be completely self-contained entities, like little rocks that had no relationships with each other. That's the other extreme. So it's really a tool to really bring tremendous amount of light into the world, and your own life, and everyone else. And I want to bless everybody here, as they say in Yiddish, if gut is besser is besser. That even if you have a great relationship, you could always make it better. And then if it's not so great, you can definitely make it better. So no matter where you are, there's always work to be done. And thank you again for your indulging me to, there's plenty more to come, but at least till Shabbos I'm going to have some respite after this. But let's open the floor here. Thank you. So who begins? Go ahead.
What advice did you give this gentleman to help him overcome and
With his father?
with his father? Yeah.
Being that it was a program and I'm speaking more to one person, I didn't know all the details. I essentially laid out that there's two options here. In generally speaking, people think because there's the mitzvah of honoring your parents, it means that whatever they do. No, if your father's coming to you with a knife, God forbid, to your heart, no, you don't have to honor him. And if the Torah says even that if your parents tell you to do something that goes against what God says, you don't have to do it either. That's not honoring your parents, because they also have to honor God. So applying that, I applied it basically, if your father's abused to you and hurted you to the point that it's going to continue to hurt you, even during this wedding, then you're not necessarily obligated to make him feel happy or make your mother feel happy or make the family feel happy, because it's not going to look good for the pictures your father's not there, which is often what we are forced to do. So we're forced to basically repress our own feelings. But if it's something that you can like so-called ignore or get beyond, and it won't hurt you, then it's a different story. That was more or less how I framed it. I couldn't really tell him what to do because I didn't know all the details. But I made point I wanted to make is that he has the license not to invite him if he wants to. It's not like an absolute yes, which I know may be surprising because you think coming that you always. I would have preferred that he would, and he would be able to some way. But the problem is he never confronted his father. You see, that was the thing. So he's living with all this thing. So really the challenge really is what he actually did afterwards, was right there. So I didn't follow, I don't even know who it is, so I don't know what happened. So it could be they are working it out. I don't know if the wedding happened yet. So maybe they are, I just was, but the fact is the most important thing is that he'd have to have the courage to actually write this form. Because that's the challenge here.
Yes.
Let him work, because the wedding is secondary to that.
That's right. Yeah.
So hopefully they are getting somewhere, and his father will realize what he did. The tragedy here is that he did it in the name of God, so to speak. Torah. He's not learning Torah. That to me was the main thing that is most obscene in a way. It's not in the name of just, but it's a distortion of thinking that if your son or daughter comes home and has not been so good in studying or doing a mitzvah, what are you judging? You're not the judge. Let God determine that. You have to show love, and you have to find out why, and help them grow, whatever it may be. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm wondering, how can we explain the concept that you've been discussing so well to people that really don't believe in God and are living in a materialistic kind of version of love mentality? One of them writes a book called The New I Do, which is really the I don't, about how people don't have to get married, or they should have marriages that last 5 years because people change and blah 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 blah. And if they have this mentality, I assume that they're really only on the materialistic plane. And so I don't know how to talk to somebody like that without really being ignored or discounted as a silly religious person.
I think it's firstly case by case. I don't know if one size fits all. I would say, firstly, I think there's also a certain distortion of what the word spirituality and soul means. From my point of view, everybody has a soul, and everybody has a way into their soul. For some people, it's through faith and religion, yes. For some people, it's through music and art, and for some people, it's through romance and love. And for some people, it's through some other, what's the word, ethereal or aesthetic experiences. So I look at it this way: every person has their soft spot. You have to find a way in that they can relate to. I mean, today's world, there is also a tremendous resistance, and for good reason, I think, to concepts of religion and faith and Torah and so on, not just by Jews and non-Jews as well, because it's been so corrupted, religion, for so many years, and there's been so much unhealthy stuff around it that a lot of people simply have written it off, and they've thrown out the baby with the bathwater. So I find from my own experience, the stereotypes are very legitimate, especially you watch a Woody Allen movie or two, and it feeds all that type of the classic ones, like guy comes to the rabbi, will you teach me the truth, that the Torah teaches the truth of life? Will you teach it to me? Of course. He says, how much will it cost? He says, how could I charge you? God didn't charge Moses. Moses didn't charge the people. So he's doubly impressed. He's getting the absolute truth, and it's free. Okay, they sit down, they open up a Chumash. It's all in Hebrew. So the rabbi says, Hebrew lessons will be $20,000. Instead, there's that punchline that there's ultimately the monetization and the corruption. So since there's already a stereotype like that, you have to be extra careful when you speak about these ideas and find the right way in. So for many people, the way to the soul is through psychology and through music. That's what I find. Those are the two most easiest ways to get in. And very hard, when it comes to religion, most people associate religion with ritual, not with spiritual. The SPI before ritual is missing. Yeah, so it's ritual, it's dogma, it's laws, it's traditions. That's how it is. Spirituality, people identify more with music, like soul music. Soul music is called soul. Transcendence. There's studies around on this topic about spirituality. Spirituality and religion are not seen as one. They're seen as two different realities. So you have to be careful when you try to speak about it and coming across as if you're like trying to push some ritual. That many people will resist. But if you're able to get beyond that and just talk about a more transcendent type of experience, it's much easier to communicate
Do you have
that.
another word for the divine when you're seeing divine in each other? The word divine.
Yeah, there's a lot of key. I can give you a lot of words that you can use that are not divine. You want some?
Sure.
The essence of things.
For each person's essence. Right.
Depends. Sanctity is a little too religious, but you can use words like. There's a lot of words. I mean, to me.
Essence is a good word.
Yeah.
Do you see the time when the Orthodoxy would reintegrate musical instruments in the Shabbat? The music. That is so inspirational to so many, and that's talking so much.
And that was in the temple.
I don't see it happening from a halachic Jewish law point of view because of the different laws around it. However, there's many ways to introduce music and soul into the service. There may not be include necessarily a physical instrument, because that's really what the key is here, is that it's dry and empty and hollow. But there's a longer discussion, like why exactly instruments are not forbidden or prohibited, rather. And so I wouldn't necessarily go advocating instruments. I would advocate a soulful service that's transformative. Because if it does that, it'll achieve what you want to achieve. So I don't think it's the pure instrument per se, it's the soulfulness of it. That's my short answer. You don't like that answer, right? Remember, I'm also not in the position exactly to lead a movement of reinstituting, of bringing musical instruments into something. No one's going to listen to me anyway, so it doesn't make a difference. But I don't think that's the issue anyway. I wouldn't necessarily feel that's the way to go.
Many schools have choirs. The Great Synagogue in
Many
Jerusalem
don't.
has
Many
magnificent-
don't.
And many hate choirs. You're from South Africa? Okay, South Africa is big in the choirs, very big. And but South African community would never tolerate if they started playing music, actual instrument, because they're traditional. Even if they're not observant. Am I correct? I was there. Someone got up with a guitar.
They reformed Jews to go to Orthodox temples.
Right, exactly. They want it to be beautiful and the choir and so on. But there are many things. Honestly, I really believe this. It's not just on Shabbat. I think the soulfulness is missing in most of Jewish tradition and ritual. It became very dry and hollow. Look at Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Such high, great days.
There's no relationship with Hashem.
But it was always soulful. That's the thing. It was always beautifully and soulful. Because it became very bureaucratic. A lot of reasons to analyze it. But it could change. That will change. Because those that do it are going to actually have bigger audiences. Competition wins. The customer is always right. People are going to go to places that serve them. That's where it's going to change. Some synagogue may never change. That's who they are, and that's that. But the younger generation comes. You give them a synagogue that's very spirited and all that. They will gravitate to that. I personally have a theory that I think for this generation, essentially rock and roll and music has replaced religion. A rock concert is like a cathedral. And especially a Grateful Dead concert was like a pilgrimage, with all the incense and all the other offerings brought. Seriously, and the music is like a prayer.
Yeah.
Look at how people go into a state of euphoria, ecstasy, naturally or unnaturally. But that's what they do, huh? Seriously, go to a young person. Where are they most soulful? In music, in a musical environment. Whether it's even a club, a disco, that type of thing. That's where you let go. If you look in history, that's where the prophets and so-called and the shamans, what do they call? Yeah, that's what they did. Whether they were con artists or not, but they put on a show like that. Religion has moved to very very technical, but look, I come from a tradition where Hasidus was meant to reintroduce the soul into the mechanical Judaism, to make it soulful again. So I think there are inroads have been made, but there's a lot more to go. A lot more.
Rabbi, you gave the example of somebody running late and then there's a couple fighting, even though it's not important. But the thing is, one person can say, well, running late is hurting a person because they're not able to, do what they need to do. And the other person could say, well, not being able to get what they need to go out, is hurting them. So it's, like, I guess it doesn't seem as trivial if one person is running late and one person's rushing them.
But when a couple is married and they're going to build their marriage based on the fact that some people just are wired to be late and some are not. If you try to change them, it may not work. So what do? You make it into World War III, or you try to figure it out and just smile and say, okay, that's how that person is. That was my point.
Oh, thank you.
I wasn't justifying being late. I'm just saying, some people, you have to choose your battles, bottom line.
Okay.
And that's that. And some things are important, some things are not. My father was perpetually late, to the point that once my mother told me they went to a dinner, and this was the funny part. They came the day before, because my father thought, okay, once and for all, he's going to be early. Okay. No, he didn't know it was the day before. They come and there's nothing going on. So my mother realized, you know what? Let's just stick back to the way it was. He marked in the wrong day, Some people are meant to be late. No, I find late being rude. Sometimes I'm late myself, but I think it's a rude thing. But I was talking more in the context of a marriage. You got to know what matters and what doesn't matter.
People will say it's disrespect.
Yeah, but you can't if everything else in marriage is working. That's the only thing. I would not make that into deal breaker. Just an example. There's hundreds of such examples.